in a doctor's appointment. You go to a doctor's appointment. I noticed some of them now too. If you hadn't been called in 15 minutes past your appointment, to let us know for whatever it's worth. I guess it makes you feel better. Uh, I know it. Wait on them. You know, our time's not worth anything, is it? No. We had, a good while back, I was trying to get Luella in the doctor's office. And we called and I said, well, we've got an appointment. You can get her in, I think, 2 or 3 o'clock, whatever. So, gosh, that was about 12:30 to 1. And said, there's nothing else. That we just went ahead and went. Well, maybe they can work us in. Lady come in there, walk in, and they took her right in. Now, that kind of upset me. Yeah, I'm sure. I heard her say, I'm just walking in. Can I get in? Yeah. She was there maybe 5 minutes, and they took her in. Yeah. Well, I had an appointment. Lorna did, so we had to wait on that appointment. But anyway, but like I said, we were very impatient. Doctor's office, waiting in line to check out at Walmart or HEB, traffic jams. And the list goes on and on. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh gosh. Right. Yeah. Well, I told her, I said, oh, I need to eat a turkey sandwich, as far as I'm concerned. But Randy fixed a big meal, and they all brought it over there. And I said, the only bad thing, well, Seth's listening. The only bad thing the only good thing about going somewhere else, you can leave. You know. And we were supposed to go invited to go to my grandsons. They're in Kyle, and but we thought, gosh, we're not good at traveling as what we used to be. Of course, the weather was bad, and there's going to be a house full, and their dogs, and their all the grandkids bring their dogs, and so anyway, we stayed at home, had a good day. But I can remember it's been a while back. I think we was at Little Tex with Dana, our youngest daughter, and I was getting a little irritated. Our waitress was a little slow, and she wasn't the best in the world. And like I said, I was getting a little irritated, and my daughter finally said, "Dad, at least she's working." And so I remember that now. When I maybe get a little irritated, I said, well, at least they're working, and that's right, exactly, yeah, right, yes, right. So I have to remind myself that now from now on when I think the waitress is a little slow or not the best in the world or gets the order mixed up or uh, I know, and it was at Mexican place here several years ago, and I think they had some waitress or wait servers now, and it's not waitress, it's servers now. They didn't show up, and they were running behind, or maybe the cook didn't show up, but finally, I think somebody and the waitress brought this meal out, and somebody said they left. And there's a guy sitting there. He says, "I'll take it." But she said, well, "Let me check with the manager," but they wouldn't let him have it. Probably some kind of rule or something. But so I know when we was in Fort Worth one time years ago, going to a Gaither concert, and it was late at night, and it was full, and with people drunk Sue, and late at night, and of course they brought me my meal, and I said, "That's not what I ordered, but I'm taking it." I'm eating it. But anyway, we do. Uh, this is, but are there some things for which you don't mind waiting? I'm thinking, if the airlines are having trouble with the plane, I don't mind waiting until they get everything make sure. And I said, I was at Midland one time flying to Austin, and we waited and waited and waited. And I saw the fire truck go out, and you could see the runway and out there. And I think they said that the plane or something had caught on fire, and some of them griping. That means we're going to have to wait longer. I said, well, I don't mind waiting. Make sure everything's okay. And but what are some things that off the top of your head is some things that you despise waiting for? Oh yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. Or maybe even a light that don't seem like it's ever going to change. No traffic anywhere, and there you are sitting there looking at a red light. Yeah, yeah. Well, I've said when Walmart gives me my 10.99, I'll start going through the checkout, self checkout. But yeah, and it's just as long, right? Or or they'll have to go do a price check on something. Oh goodness. Mm. I've used one and then mm. Oh gosh. Yeah, right. Well, we went to visit some friends in New Orleans several years ago, and from Baton Rouge, I don't know what, to New Orleans, it took us over 4 hours. Yeah. And I finally got this town. I told us, so we're getting off and just kill some time or something. Yeah. And got off and went to Walmart, and the electricity was out. We couldn't, everything was closed. Testing my patience again. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Oh, I've got when I worked in Temple, get to Clark Road, and the cars backed up. I said, "Oh, they've had a wreck." No, it was the light in Walmart. But anyway, we could probably go on and on about things that kind of irritate us. Uh, Waiting for your wife to get ready. So, no, I think Luella's watching too. Yeah. Oh. Or back when you was dating, and you waited and waited for the for your date to get ready. But they needed to. But Micah wrote to a nation that had waited year after year for the coming of a Messiah who would right the wrongs of the world and bring salvation to the people of God. They needed to realize that hope was found in God's promise of salvation to those who trust Him. They needed to hold on to faith and live in anticipation of the day God would deliver them. Chapters 6 and 7 contain Micah's final message. It begins with the imagery of a lawsuit brought by God against the people. God was the judge and jury. Israel and Judah had violated God's covenant. Therefore, they were in breach of contract for breaking their treaty with their God. He had delivered them from Egypt, provided them with godly leaders, protected them from their enemies, and made a way for them to enter the promised land. But instead of keeping their covenant with the Lord by acting justly, loving the Lord faithfully, and walking with Him in humility, they thought they could appease Him by offering an abundant amount of sacrifices. In chapter 6, verses 4 to 8. The people's sins were so glaring that no defense could be made. In Deuteronomy 28:38 and 49, the Lord reminded them of the curses He promised to bring upon Israel for breaking its covenant with Him, declaring they were about to happen now. God had said, I've had enough. And I keep saying, and we talk about that, when is God going to say, look at this nation and say, I've had enough? Time after time, willing to forgive and forget, and we continually turn against Him. So many things we see that today, even 10 years ago, we would have thought was terrible. I've said, gosh, when was that? It was a senator from Colorado that was running for president for the nomination, president's nomination. A picture witness showed up with a lady sitting on his lap. That was it. And they said we go from that to a president having sex in the White House, and so much more that we don't know about. But that's an example that shows how much we have changed, where we've gone. And like I said last Sunday, there's the governor of the state of Washington is a professing homosexual. That used to be would have been unheard of. We had two congressmen or Congress whatever in Washington that were cross dressers. I mean, where look where we've come, and we look at Israel, this in Micah, and said, how could they have done that? How could they have kept turning their back on God? But the people, we're doing it today. We're doing it not just the United States, but the whole world. Anything, what's right is wrong, and what's wrong is right nowadays. And if you stand up for right, you're ridiculed and talked down and just on and on. You see even the news all the time. Everybody that's standing up for right, and they're put down, they're ridiculed, and even made fun of or whatever. But God had got to the point here with the people of Israel and Judah. He said, "I've had enough." Someone read now in our lesson text, chapter 7, verses 1 through 6.
How sad for me, for I am like one who, when the summer fruit has been gathered after the gleaning of the great harvest, finds no great pleasure to eat, no early fig which I crave. Faithful people have vanished from the land. There is no one upright among the people. All of them wait in ambush to shed blood. They hunt each other with a net. Both men so good at accomplishing evil. The official and the judge demand a bribe. And the powerful man, in many cases, people desire. They plot it together. The best of them is like a life. The most upright is worse than a hedge of thorns. The day of your watchman, the day of your punishment is coming. At this time their panic is here. Do not rely on a friend. Don't trust in a close companion. Seal your mouth from the woman who lies in your home. Surely a son considers his father a fool. A daughter opposes her mother, and a daughter-in-law is against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own household.
Micah's message ended with a lament, an expression of sorrow and grief. Woe is me is an explanation of despair and hopelessness. Sometimes I think sometimes that's when misused. We hear people, oh, woe is me. I'm suffering, I'm carrying my cross for the Lord. Come in. In the book of Job, he felt this way though he was innocent. Micah was describing his feelings of alienation, isolation, and discouragement as he witnessed the corruption of the people of God. Micah then used agriculture references to describe his feelings. Once the farmer harvested his crop, the law forbade him from going back into his fields. Orchards and vineyards are vineyards to get anything they might have missed. They were forbidden to do this. This was the law, but whatever was left for the poor and the foreigners who had no land of their own. We've been covering in the book of Ruth. This is an example of that too. The book of Ruth was a good example of this practice. I always think and wonder, that Ruth was a virtuous woman, I have to say, because when she went into the fields to harvest what was left, it says Boaz noticed her. Well, someone would have made Boaz notice her. I mean, she noticed Boaz, but she was. I always thought that was said a lot for Ruth. She didn't. Well, we used to say now, throw herself at him. But Micah was saying that he was likely a hungry man who went out to glean, only to discover that he was too late, finding not a cluster to eat. What Micah described is the opposite of what God had promised to Israel if they had remained faithful to his covenant with them. The people had become spiritually barren as in the picture of the land. The good man referred to those who loved the Lord and were loyal to him. An upright person was one who maintained a standard of living in accordance to God's laws, doing what was right toward God and others. I was thinking when I was working out at Dale City, Dale City, Texas, was a place you had to be going there to get there. You've always heard that saying, you got to be going there. It was 90 miles from El Paso, 90 miles from Van Horn, 90 miles from Carlsbad. And like I said, it was off the beaten path. But they had a lot of grapes. There was a big agriculture area. And they had a lot of grapes. And there was a lot of places that I think A&M had a place where it was an experiment station and everything. But they would plant about 2 rows of grapes for the people. In other words, you could go out there and pick. In other words, that kept people from going out through the whole vineyards and picking. And I thought, well, that's kind of neat. And gosh, big old clusters of grapes, you couldn't imagine, you know. But it's kind of, in a way, kind of a picture. It wasn't that what they left, people could go in and pick, but they set a couple of rows of grapes aside where they could go pick. And you know, I've heard too, if you plant grapes, you need to plant twice as many because the birds get half of them. I've heard that, and I've tried grapes and I never had much luck with growing them. But people like these were no longer. There was none left in the land, and the only people that remained were those who lie in wait for blood. Pretty bad situation, didn't it? Pretty gloomy. If no one was around to attack, they were looking for their prey with a net. In other words, they'd attack those around. If there's no one left, they go around looking for them with a net. Whatever it took for them to better their economic standing, they were ruthlessly taking advantage of the less fortunate. They craved what others had and stopped at nothing to obtain what their covetous hearts desired. They disregarded the thou shalt not covet. I mean, I want that. That looks better than what I've got, so I'm going to take it. They hunted down their fellow countrymen like animals. They do evil with both hands. The majority of people, we all have a dominant style. We're either right or left-handed. I always joke, look, Billy's left-handed. I said, well, you're using the wrong hand, you know. And I can remember, I always went to school, I felt sorry for those that were left-handed. In some earlier school, they tried to change it. They wouldn't let them write left-handed. But I remember I had a good friend who was left-handed, and of course you had to put your paper like this to write, and he would turn his hand around like that to write. They wouldn't let him turn his page and I said, gosh, how did he even learn to write doing that like that? But you know, the majority of us, some are what you call ambidextrous, but not very many. My brother was left-handed, and I mean, he couldn't touch his nose with his right hand. He was so left-handed. But Seth, he writes and he's left-handed, and everything else right-handed. My sister's the same way. So I don't know. But we all have a dominant side. But here, what Micah is saying, both hands were dedicated to accomplishing evil. One might say in today's slang, they're in it with both hands. You know, we've heard that say, they went into this with both hands. In verse 4, Micah provided a vivid picture of even the best of the people was a briar, and the most upright was sharper than a thorn hedge. If this was the best, what was the worst? Gosh, can you imagine? I remember when we lived early in Brownwood, we went to an association annual meeting. And I was talking, I don't know what church he was from, but I was talking to a gentleman there, and he said, asking where I was going to church. I said, First Baptist Early. Y'all know where it's at. He said, boy, y'all are really doing things at First Early. And I thought, if we're doing things, what are they doing? I didn't say anything, but I thought, gosh, they're not doing anything. And Micah went on to describe the people's coming judgment. Watchmen were posted on the walls of the city as lookouts, warning of any invading armies. Israel's prophets often saw themselves as watchmen for the people, warning them of impending judgment if they failed to repent. Even though the people ignored the prophets of God, in his mercy sent Micah, his watchman, to warn of judgment. The day would come when the watchman would see the armies approaching to invade the land and carry them off to bondage. Can you imagine this picture of that watchman on the walls? And he looks out there and hears these great armies fixing to attack. Can you imagine his thinking and probably just running, shouting, and trying to get get their attention, trying to get the armies, their army to gather together, but it's too late. It's too late. They've already approached, and there's a point, a time where they cannot protect themselves. Verses 5 and 6, the nation had become from bad to worse. They could not trust or rely on a friend, a neighbor, family, or even a spouse. Betrayal was everywhere. You know, that's to me, that's rock bottom. When you can't depend on a friend or a neighbor or even a family member or even your spouse that would turn on you. The 12th dynasty of Pharaoh of Egypt wrote to his son, trust not a brother, know not a friend, and make no intimates. In other words, no friends. Don't trust anyone. That's the point that it's bad. And this is where they had come, the point that Israel and Judah had become. They couldn't trust anyone. I mean, you had to watch your back all the time because someone's going to turn on you. If you can't trust a friend or a family member or even a spouse, like I said, who can you trust? That's about it, isn't it? If you can't trust them, and you know, I've always said, you know, I said, you know, to me, a true friend is someone you can confide in and know that they're not going to share it or tell others. And I said, a true friend, you don't have to say, well, I don't tell this to anyone. Uh, you don't have to. But there's times that we've told friends in confidence or maybe in a family member that word got back to them that they spread it. And it hurts, doesn't it? When you've had a friend that you feel like you can rely on and they turn on you. And this is where they were in Judah and in Israel. That even their friends and their family and spouse had turned on them. Why? To gain whatever. To gain some of the time. I think a lot of times when you're in school, I think it was probably to gain popularity uh, and gain an advantage. And especially maybe if you were in competition with someone for something, even a play or sports or whatever, and then they said something about you that made you look bad, and because they wanted that part or that position, and they turned on you, you thought they were a friend, and it just, and like I said, and this is where they were, that they couldn't trust anyone, and you know that's disheartening, really, when you can't even talk to someone for fear that they're gonna turn on you. But but in verse 6, Micah moved on to three more ruined relationships in the home. First, the sons showed contempt for their fathers and considered them fools and worthless. You know, we've said as we grew older, our parents became smarter and smarter. When we were teenagers, probably they were probably the dumbest people in the world. But as we grew older, they became very smart. And second, daughters rose up in opposition against their mothers. And third, daughter-in-laws oppose their mother-in-laws. I'm not even going to touch that. or, or, or son-in-laws oppose their, that's probably more, son-in-laws oppose their mother-in-laws. But I'll have to say, I had a good mother-in-law. I got to say that in front of Linda because that was her mother. But yeah, there's no telling how many jokes have been told about mother-in-laws. And yeah, it does seem bad. Yeah. But you know, this was a direct disobedience to the fifth commandment to honor their father and mother. Exodus 20:12. It seems to be the thing now, and even just talking about dishonor, and it seems like this is a thing now for people in government to leak secret information, get their name, but yet not that they just, you know, it goes below the secret information or confidential information. There's nothing done. Yeah, right. Like it's the truth. Yeah, yeah. And I forget the phrase they use now. That's not lying. I forget what they call it. Yeah, truth changing. And if and I had a supervisor one time. He had one. You know, he was one of them didn't think he had enough sense to find your way to work. And on our jobs, especially, we had to keep a job diary. And anything that went on, instructions we got, and he was out there one day and gave me some instructions on some things. Of course, I put it in the diary. Usually with him, he made him initial it. So he come back the next time and he called me on something. I said, well, that's what you said. You put it in the diary. Well, if that's not what I said, if that's what I said, that's not what I meant. So we see that a lot today. If that's what I said, that's not what I meant. I mean, I don't know what they meant, but we see that. There's several years ago. Well, I can't remember his name. He was in the army, and he leaked some classified information. And I think he spent a little time, and I think, and of course, the government paid for a sex change. What? Yeah, Manny. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I think maybe he spent a little time. He was what do you call it? Well, commuted his sentence. Yeah. I think he spent some time in, but it was commuted. Yeah. So, but like I said, where are we? Both hands. We jumped in with both hands. Someone read now verses 7 through 10. Therefore, the word therefore, I think, is in uh, some of the verses or some of the translation. I like the New American Standard says, but as for me. In other words, sharply contrast with the people of Israel Micah had just described. Micah declared he would look expectantly for the Lord, says, I will wait for the God of my salvation. Just as Micah was sure God would bring judgment on Israel because of their unfaithfulness, he was confident the Lord would keep his covenant with those who loved him and were faithful to keep his covenant. Looking to the Lord and waiting on his salvation means that in the most desperate of situations, we not only believe the Lord is the only one who can deliver us, we also believe he will. Boy, I'm going to read, let me turn to that right quick. I was going to have someone read them. 2 Corinthians 4, 7 through 10. Let me look at that right. We'll get there in just 2 Corinthians 4, 7 through 10. Whoops, I'm looking at the wrong one. In whose case the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they might not see the light of the gospel, the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For we do not preach ourselves, but Christ Jesus as Lord, and ourselves as your bondservants for Jesus' sake. For God, I started the wrong place. 7, I'm sorry. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, so that the unsurpassing greatness of the power will be of God and not from ourselves. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not despairing, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying about in the body the dying of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our bodies. I think that says a lot. Yes, we may go through troubling times, but God will be there. He'll be there each time for us. Waiting on God means trusting in his wisdom to always do what is right, in the right way, the right time, to the right extent. So always we say it's in God's time. Sometimes that's kind of hard for us to wait, trying to wait. Sometimes we have a better plan, and why not now? Uh, and it's like I said, we're an impatient people, and we see so much sin and lawlessness and everything, and we think, God, why? Why do you allow that to go on? If I was in charge, well, I'd already taken care of that. I'd already zapped them for that. But we see in God here and in Micah, God used an evil nation to try to bring Israel back in line. And we see that probably today. Um, but waiting from God, like I said, means trusting His wisdom. Repeat that. His wisdom to always do what is right, in the right way, the right time, and the right extent. Micah could declare with confidence, my God will hear me. He's always there. He has an ear for us. In verse 8, Micah began speaking on behalf of Israel. The Lord would use Israel's enemies as an instrument of judgment, but their enemies should be careful not to rejoice in it. The only reason they would be victorious over Israel is because God made it so. And that's sometimes maybe it's hard for us to understand or some to understand. God allowed that. God made it so. And that's the only reason that the invading armies, Assyrians or whatever, Babylon, whatever it be, is God allowed it. They could have not have acted without God letting them do it. Israel would endure a period of darkness by way of God's judgment, but the Lord would shed light on His blessings on them once again. Through Moses' words, God had warned Israel of exile, but also promised He would restore and reestablish the nation back in the land of their inheritance. When the Israelites were in Moab, preparing to go into the promised land, God warned He would bring His curses on them and send them into exile if they disobeyed Him. But after that period of time in captivity, He would have compassion on them and restore them. I don't believe we can comprehend how a compassionate God. How much, we say and we believe it and rejoice in it that He is compassionate, but I don't think we understand, and I don't know the depths of His compassion for us. He forgives and forgets. Micah recognized they had sinned and must endure God's judgment, but he also knew that according to God's promise, He would use this judgment to bring His people back to Him. In the ancient Near East, people believed that when one nation conquered another nation, the conquering had also defeated the loser's God. Therefore, Israel's enemies would believe they had vanquished the Lord God and would taunt Israel about their supposed accomplishments. However, these enemies would be shocked when the Lord defeated them, trampling as the mire of the streets. What these nations had done to Israel would be done to them. They thought for a while, well, we've got it. Our God that we worship, He's with us. That statue, that piece of stone or wood, but yet their day was coming, and that they would fall at the feet of Jesus. So I'm going to read now verses 18 through 20. Okay. Verses 18 through 20, chapter 7. Micah concluded his book by reminding the people of how wonderful the Lord is, and of the hope they can have because of His faithful love to them. The question in verse 18 emphasizes that there is no one else like God because of His ability and willingness to forgive the iniquity of the remnant of His possession. The Lord does not hold on to His anger forever. I think sometimes we have to be careful. And I think we have been accused, especially as Baptists, that, well, you can do whatever you want to. God's going to forgive you. I like the words of Adrian Rogers. He said, he's talking about security, being a security believer. He said, I have people tell me, well, you can sin as much as you want to. And he said, I already sin more than I want to. I think that's so true. But the Lord does not hold his anger forever. You know, and we have a loving God, but we also have a just God. You know, it's he disciplines the ones he loves. Uh, we discipline our children, the ones that we loved. We were disciplined as children because we were loved. Sometimes I didn't think so at the time, uh, but it was. But you look back, and really, I have to admit, I'm thankful for them whippings. I guess it's spanking. It wasn't a whipping. There's a whipping and a spanking, two different things, I think. What? A whooping, yeah. Yeah, it's a whooping. Right. And and, you know, it's Glenn and I was talking the other day. Uh, some of the things that, of course, some of you, like Steve, you played football and everything, how the coaches belittled you back then and talked down to you. They'd be fired nowadays and tell you how sorry you were. You weren't any count. You weren't any good. But it was to, you know, it was a point where you wanted to go out there and prove him wrong. And I've always joked. I've said jokingly too. I had a teacher that told me. He said, and he told me more than once, and you'll never amount to anything. Well, that was to motivate me. He'd have got in trouble for that now. And I've laughed. I told him, I said, well, he was right. I worked for the government over 30 years. And so, but you know, we did. You look back, and it was really in love that they wanted to see us better ourselves and to try to make something of ourselves. So it was a way of discipline. I had a supervisor when I worked for well, it was the highway department then, the Tex dot. Now, he was very hard on me. But I look back, I've even sat there at the drafting table and be drawing something. He'd come by and grab it and wad it up and throw it in the trash. Says, "Do it over. That's not neat enough." And you know, you'd want to kill him. But you know, I look back. I think he looked back. He saw potential in me, and he saw he was a perfectionist, and he wanted and it helped me later on in my careers. That even though he was hard on me, but gosh, it was like I said at the time. You know, I didn't have a bit of use for him, but like I said, I think he looking back, he was doing it for my good, and that was a way in a way a sense of discipline, and and like I said, I guess he maybe saw potential in me. If he didn't, he'd say, "Well, just heck with it," you know. So, but anyway, we go through many things in life that we're disciplined or that we lives in learning, discipline from our parents, our school, and it was for our good. Uh, I don't think I ever remember. Well, I ever and maybe they did. I doubt it, but ever enjoyed giving me a whooping. It was for my good. I never heard that. Some of them say, "Well, this hurts me more than it does you." Well, I never heard that from one. And I don't think I ever remember my mother telling me, "Wait till your daddy gets home." She took care of it right then. But anyway, like I said, you look, you thought it was terrible at the time, and you thought, "Well, they're the meanest people," and but it was for our good. And child abuse, yes, yes, yeah. Uh, we had some friends one time that we were over to her house, and they had a little boy, the youngest one. He was probably about 7 or 8 years old, and I think he'd got him spanking. And we were sitting outside on the porch, and he stuck his head in the window. His mother said, "I guess you know you're guilty of child abuse." Oh, she jumped up in there, took him to the phone, said, call the police right now, call them." He was begging, crying again. Oh, some of the things I remember things that aren't important. I like to, where was I? But the question of verse 18 emphasizes that there was no one else like God because of his ability and willingness to forgive the iniquity of the remnant of his possessions. The Lord does not hold his anger. What delights him in demonstrating his unfailing love to his children? As Micah continued describing God, he knew that his God cares for a weak and never neglects those to whom he has committed himself. Therefore, Micah was confident the Lord would again have compassion on his people. Micah declared, he will cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. Boy, grasp that. I mean, he's away, never to see them again, never to bring them up. Satan's good at reminding us. Reminds me all the time. But meaning God will completely forgive our sins and guilt forever. And like I said, and he even forgets. Micah's final statement was directed to the Lord. He declared his confidence that God would keep all his covenant promises made to Israel's forefathers, Jacob and Abraham, as he swore from the days of old. He would make them as the stars of the heaven and the sand on the seashores. And in thee, thy seed, shall all the families of the earth shall be blessed. That's us, too. All the families of the earth, through Abraham, will be blessed. What a way for Micah to conclude this message. Every believer can count on God's eternal faithfulness and steadfast love. What a wonderful God that we have. There's a song I'm reminded, and honestly, it says, of course, we say it too, and there's nothing wrong. God is good. But the song says that God is good, but God is great. Yes, God is great. Any comments? Well, we start out in John next week. John the Revelator. That's the song, John the Revelator. Looking forward to that. You know, we go through the Bible. What, 7 years, I think. Every 7 years we go through the Bible here. Okay, no comments.